okay. I'll do it all with my Openbook, which is on the screen at the moment. In fact, if you see the menu there is the Openbook menu. Okay. In fact, you'll probably notice that the typing there is actually me typing into an Openbook document. You can actually use Openbook as a word processor, albeit a very simple one. So, for example, in the Edit menu, Openbook starts normally in the read-only mode, but you can switch it to the Edit mode and do what I'm doing now.
Blank.
Just typing. So I can.
By Peter one space Cappy blank.
And as I'm typing, and
so you just went into Edit and changed it.
That's right. I just went to the Edit menu and I switched it to Edit mode. And now I've got a real cursor, you know, a real moving
Peter Cracknell E-T-E-R
type cursor, as opposed to the cursor you're probably more familiar with in Openbook, which goes word by word. I'll just switch it back to normal read-only mode.
Edit, read-only mode, leaving menus in read-only mode.
And as I'm
you can also just hit Control E as well, which is a toggle.
Yeah, Danny, that's right. Yes, so you can, if you can remember shortcut keys, then as Danny's saying, all of these things have shortcut keys. With when
I can't remember what I had for breakfast, let alone shortcut keys.
And when I'm teaching people for the first time, I'll go the long way around, show them as we go through the menus, but make a note that, you know, oh, by the way, the shortcut key is Control P or Control E or whatever it is. And then as a user, they may find that useful, but at least going through the menus, there's always a way that they can get to these controls if they can't remember, like me. But now you'll notice that my arrow key...
Cracknell, Peter, Workshop, Openbook.
Moves word by word. There's sometimes, of course, when when you scan something and you want to make some minor corrections and so on, then you can switch to Edit mode and just do that as if it was a word processor. Okay, let's see who's here. We've got two Trevors. Who's the other Trevor? Trevor?
Well, my other Trevor is the iPad Mini.
Ah, okay.
That's actually really good.
Yes, I've just bought one.
Is that company or private?
Company. I've just got it here. It hasn't even been opened the box yet.
Split. I was going to say, just a split personality, isn't it, Trevor?
Yep. Works like a charm.
All right. Okay. Well, I'll get started on this in a sort of a go to woes.
Openbook 9.0.
A go to woe sort of way. Nick, you're here. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, I can. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah. This was primarily for you, Nick. But rather than I think there's points in here that everybody could benefit from. So, Nick, in your case, I think you're going to be doing some training with Openbook up at Townsville. And
that's right. Yes.
Is that all working now? Is the actual hardware working, as far as you know?
It is working. Yes, they did manage to get the camera working on the existing computer, but when I was there, the IT department couldn't get the computer to accept the camera. It did look like there had been some kind of government, blocks on accepting any other kind of foreign device that they couldn't unblock at that time. So they were going to supply Scott with another computer, but in fact it has accepted it now. So the camera's up and going. Scott's a bit reluctant to play with Openbook. So really I kind of need to know a bit more than what I do know now. I went through that help menu on Openbook, and it has got quite a detailed explanation of all the functions. But I think a hands-on session like this, or a session from someone like yourself who knows it very well is will be helpful to me for Scott's purpose.
Yeah. Okay. I was in a situation where a government department, I can't remember whether it was the tax office or something like that, they did lock out the USB port devices, and hang on a sec. Tim. Good, good. I'm really sorry, Tim. I'm in the middle of the workshop at the moment. I'll call them back if you want to take some details. Thanks. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah. So I think, Nick, that's probably the same thing, that they were locking out the USB ports, and of course you need the USB port, of course, for the Pearl camera.
The other thing in that situation was it was a very, very busy office, and there was a couple of other people sitting in, kind of asking me questions as well about, you know, all the features of the menus here. And I found it a bit intense that I couldn't give fairly snappy answers to three people's questions. So in one way, it was good that we couldn't get the camera going, although we did open up Openbook and had a bit of a play with it. But I knew then that I needed a bit more training on the program to be able to cope with that situation. Perhaps next time I'll ask for a meeting room. You know, one of the maybe hopefully they have a meeting room or something that I could sit down with Scott with my laptop and go through it in a bit more of a quiet situation.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. Yeah. So just as an overview, I'm sure most of you know, but of course Openbook is an OCR scanning program. It's been around for many, many years. In fact, when I first started back in '94, it was you know, the latest, greatest thing. So it's been around for a long time. And the idea was that though there are OCR programs available, like OmniPage and TextBridge and so on, some of them come as a bundle with your scanner. They are primarily visual programs that require you to use a mouse and to make changes and so on. Or they are sort of a black box approach whereby you press a button, it fires up in the background, and suddenly you get a Word document out at the other end. And there is a place for those things, but Openbook was designed to give a blind person complete access to all of the functions of the OCR process, and then add on some bells and whistles as well. And with that in mind, it's probably still the very best of the OCR programs available. Danny, I don't know if you'd agree with that or whether you want to add anything to that.
Not really, no. I think, certainly the ones that I've sort of played around with, it's definitely the better of them.
Yeah, okay.
There is an alternative which some of you may hear about. It's a program called K1000 Kurzweil.
Yeah.
And I have used that in the past. I don't know what it's like now, but when I was using it, it was just constant, just crashing. There was no reason. You'd be in the middle of doing something and blue screen, come back, lost all your settings, lost all your work. I don't know if it was just my system, but I did hear other people were having similar issues at the time. Maybe they've fixed it by now. That was quite a few years ago. I don't know.
Yeah, I used to be involved with Kurzweil when I was with Optech Systems, and yes, it was equally a very powerful OCR program designed for blind people. The process of all OCR is some kind of an image is acquired, usually with a flatbed scanner, in our case here with the Pearl, and that image is then processed by the OCR engine, which is sitting there in the background. The Openbook program uses 2 or 3 of them as options. One of them is OmniPage. There's also FineReader. They process the page from top to bottom, and they try to follow a logic, just like our clear readers do, looking from the top and trying to work across the page in terms of defined edges and groups of text, and then process them in zones into text. Then the OCR program then either channels all of that text into Microsoft Word, or in the case of Openbook, just within its own word processing area, which you can see on the screen at the moment, this white area with some words I've just typed. So look, I think possibly what I'll do is I'll sort of just go through it from the ABC of it, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of making adjustments to settings and so on. So I've attached the Pearl camera to one of the USB ports, and the first thing you check when you're installing Openbook with a Pearl is you go to the Advanced menu and you check Device Selection. Can you all see what I'm doing here with my mouse pointer? And Danny, you can hear this working through as well?
Device selection dialog.
No problem.
Acquisition source.
Yeah, we can hear it.
Pearl camera.
And because I've got the Pearl in, it notices it's there, except if you're Nick in Townsville and the USB port is locked out.
Well, this box came up, but no selection for Pearl camera.
That's right, because it wasn't recognised as a device with correct drivers on it. Now, in this down acquisition source box,
Pearl camera.
if I had other scanners attached, like a Canon scanner or something like that, they would appear in the list and I could select them. But we'll leave the Pearl there. There are some properties here that I never really fiddle with. I'll just click on that now.
Camera properties dialog. Light frequency correction. Combo box 60 Hz.
And the light frequency correction might be applicable where you've got overhead fluorescence set.
I have actually found that does make a bit of a difference.
Yeah. The Americans, of course, they work on 60 Hertz and we work on 50 Hertz. So there could be a case of flickering interference between the lighting in the room and the Pearl camera. So we could change it to 50 Hertz.
50 Hertz. Okay. Button. Properties. Button.
Okay.
Out of dialog.
One of the things I need to just stress at this point is with Openbook, you do need to keep saving your settings as you go. The default settings, it's not automatically remembered. You need to save the settings. So if I make a change like that or any of my other changes, I do need to go to the settings menu and save the settings.
Save settings dialog. Enter new settings file name. Edit box default.
And I always just use default. Of course, you could choose a different name, and then you could invoke other settings, depending on certain situations. But default is the one we generally use. That's the one that starts up with Openbook. And all of these boxes here are ticked. So what it's saying is that any changes to these particular components will be saved. So I'm going to do that now.
Please note dialog. File default already exists. Do you want to overwrite it?
Yes, I do.
Yes. Out of dialog.
So I just encourage you, as you're going through making changes, to remember to save as you go. Okay. Now, so apart from scanning with a scanner, you could also open an image file or a PDF. Even if the PDF is an image file only. This is one of the great strengths of Openbook, is that if somebody's working with image-only PDFs, they do then have the ability to OCR that PDF and get editable, speakable text out of it. And as we've been talking about before, PDF format is very, very largely represented as content on the internet and within companies and organizations. So Openbook, and one of the great selling points of Openbook is that ability to scan PDFs. But we're going to be using the Pearl, and I'm going to go to the Acquire menu.
Acquire.
And you'll see in the Acquire menu that Acquire a Page, this is the one we would hit to take a scan, has got a couple of shortcuts, the spacebar and the F4 key.
Pete, it's Jeffrey. Your voice is all breaking up. I don't know if you've moved away from your microphone or whatever, but you're all crackling on me.
Thank you. Okay. That's only just happened. Can you hear me now better?
That's better.
I can hear you okay, Peter.
I'll just repeat. I was just saying that I've gone to the Acquire menu, and I'm just showing you that the option to acquire a page has got two shortcuts, the F4 key and the space bar. Generally speaking, people would just hit the space bar to scan a new page. And that's a very convenient key, of course, the space bar being a big key. It's very easy to scan with the space bar. In fact, Openbook can be configured so it can be used pretty much just with the space bar and one or two other keys. It doesn't have to be used in a very sophisticated way. It can be used in a very simple way. You can set people up and all they do is hit the space bar and just listen and maybe use arrow keys or something like that. But they've put the F4 key there for a reason, and that's because if you had been in
edit mode,
and I hit the space bar to acquire a new page, all it does is puts in a space. So I need an alternative shortcut, and that's why we use the F4 key as an alternative shortcut key. Okay, so what happens when we do that? Well, what happens is Openbook says I'm going to take a picture and I'm going to use the workflow settings that you have previously defined. And we'll spend a little bit of time with workflow. Basically, what we're talking about with workflow settings is essentially configurations, where we can templates, if you like, as to the sort of settings that are checked or unchecked in the recognition process. And so when we do an F4 or a space, it says, okay, well, what's the current workflow? We'll use that, and away we go. So I'm going to do that now. I'm just going to go acquire a page.
Acquire a page.
Oh, before I do that, depending on the lighting in your room, bearing in mind that many vision impaired people have very low lighting levels for glare reasons, you may want to turn on the light
Acquire leaving menus
of the Pearl. And the shortcut key for that is Control L for light, which should work.
Space.
Camera light enabled.
And it said camera light enabled. And that's just illuminated just the A4 area underneath the Pearl. Now I'm just going to do an F4.
Image farm name dialog. Farm name, header box.
I wasn't expecting that. Well, that's a good example because my workflow is set to just acquire an image file. So I'm going to have to cancel that.
Out of dialog. Acquire. Workflow.
And I don't know if you can see that when I look at the workflow in the acquire menu, the acquire image only was selected. I would normally use acquire and read, which I'll do now.
Acquire and read modified.
And we'll come back to some of these other presets in a moment.
Leaving menus.
So I've now set it back to the normal default acquire and read, and I'll do an F4 now. Get the shutter sound.
Brent O'Neill. Wilston's Chris Furman has rolled with the rising crop. Now he's ready to mix it with the big boys. After 3 years...
And I shut it up just by pressing the Control key. And for those of you familiar with JAWS and all those sorts of things, Control is what I call the shut up key. So just hit Control to just shut him up. And you'll notice that the cursor is blinking just where I stopped and paused. Now, because I'm in edit mode, if I press my left arrow key,
space, E-E-R-A-T,
I'm moving through it just like as if I was in Word.
H-T, space.
If I want to go word by word, I do Control arrow.
After boys, big, ease. Wilston, Juniors,
and so on, just up and down, left, right, and so on. That's because I'm in edit mode. If I had been in just normal read mode,
edit, read only mode,
then my arrow keys move word at a time.
Squad, Junior, Nashville, in years.
Now that what I was scanning was actually a fairly complex thing, and that's why it took a while to do. I'll just show you what the original looked like. And to do that, I go to the View menu.
File, Edit, Acquire, View.
And you might notice I'm just using my arrow keys to move through the menus. I'm not using the mouse. With these things, with all Windows, proper Windows programs, you should be able to get to the menus just by pressing the Alt key and then arrow keys to arrow across. And of course that's exactly how a vision impaired person would do it.
View, text view checked.
And you'll notice that the text view is checked, and that's why we're seeing the large print in the window there. Let's have a look at the exact view.
Exact view, leaving menus. Exact view.
And you can see it's just a newspaper article. And you'll also notice that there is a highlight in that newspaper, that image there.
3. After, boys, big,
And that is right, it's synchronized with the text view. So I could move through it
Estonia.
like just with arrow keys. And this can be useful if somebody has got some vision and they're half the time they're just listening, but sometimes they need to refer to a diagram or a chart or something. They can switch to the exact view and see the diagram, and they can blow that up too. So in the menu, if I go to the View menu,
View, zoom view, zoom in.
I can zoom in or zoom out. This is the exact view being zoomed, and you'll notice that the shortcut key is Control and the number pad plus. So let's just try that shortcut.
View, leaving menus.
And as I make the image bigger, you can see that it starts to get fuzzier and fuzzier and fuzzier until it gets so fuzzy you can't really make it out too well. Are you able to see that on your screens there?
Yes.
Yeah, yep.
I noticed that it doesn't leave the highlighted text on the left-hand side. It just kept zooming in.
Correct.
Towards like the middle of the document.
That's correct. And I can click anywhere I like
Now.
to bring the cursor to that point. And I can read from that point, and the key, the shortcut key to read without going to the menus is F12.
Now back to full fitness. He has resolved to make his mark on the senior scene. The seniors in Australia are pretty good mentors.
Now that's the exact view, and you can even have a split view.
File, view, split view, leaving menus. Split view.
And
Okay.
this is particularly useful where you are with somebody and they're saying, oh, that sounded very strange, I didn't get that. And you can see in the original what's causing the problem. It could be that there was a crease or a staple or a coffee stain or something like that. And that way you can actually see what the issue might be. You can adjust the size of the split here. You just go to the division and just drag it up or down. So that's what you do.
View.
And you'll notice also there's a camera view.
Camera view. Leaving menus. Camera view.
Now that is actually now taken over the camera, and you've got a live view of the paperwork and your hand and so on. It's not sufficiently smooth or fast to do tasks like handwriting, though. I mean, of course, you've got all sorts of broadband issues, but on my screen there is a jerky lag as I write under the screen here. I'll switch the light on as well.
Camera light enabled.
So it's really, I wouldn't say that this could be a replacement for a CCTV, not for writing anyway. especially when you're zoomed in at any size at all. You can see that I go off the screen straight away if I pull my hand down the A4 page. So if I zoomed out enough to fit the whole page on, you know, you wouldn't get any magnification at all. So if somebody says, oh, couldn't I use that as a CCTV? Well, not really. Not really. And that, of course, is why the Zoom Twix has that live video camera as well as the Zoom X camera, for the same reason, exactly the same reason. Any questions?
No, that's good.
No, that's good so far, Peter.
Okay. So now that we've, I'll go back to the text view.
View, text view, leaving menus, text view.
And you'll notice that I've just chosen a black print on a white background at a certain size. Now we can adjust that for people with low vision in the low vision menu.
File, edit, low vision, size, low vision settings dialog, increase size, button.
And they borrowed, Openbook borrowed these low vision controls from the Win program. The Win program is closely related to the Openbook program, but the Win program was designed for people who are dyslexic or who have reading difficulties that are not strictly vision impairment. So these controls are similar to the ones used in Win. And the focus is currently on the size button. I could click on these with the mouse, or I could just press enter on the size button. I'm just going to do that now.
Larger.
Or I could tab over to the decrease size button.
Decrease size button. Smaller.
And very quickly we can adjust the size. Okay, the other thing we can do, of course, is we can tab over to the colours. And this goes through some presets, just like on a CCTV.
White on black. Green on black. Yellow on black. Yellow on dark blue.
We might be here for a while.
White on dark blue. Black on rose. Black on beige. Black on sky blue. Red on yellow. Yellow on blue.
You get the idea. I'm not aware of a way of quickly going back to black and white. I think, as far as I know, you have to just keep going through them until you get there.
Blue on yellow. Black on yellow. Violet on black. Black on blue on white. Black on green. Red on white. White on green on black on blue. Blue on black. Black on red on black. Violet on white on black. Orange on green. Yellow and green.
Some of them are not so good.
Orange on white. White on orange. Amber on black.
All right, we'll leave it on amber on black for the moment. Now I'm going to tab over to the next control.
Spotlight button. Yellow and blue. Blue on yellow. Black on yellow. Violet on black on blue on white.
So do you see how that is what I call the karaoke highlight? They call it the spotlight. And that's a way of adjusting that to suit particular vision conditions. I'm going to tab over to the fonts now.
Fonts button. Arial narrow. Times New Roman. Verdana.
And you get the idea. And perhaps more important than the font is the spacing.
Spacing button. More spacing. More spacing. Most spacing. Least spacing.
The important thing to notice here as we change these settings is that the text always wraps to the screen window. Now this it seems like a small thing, but it's actually a really crucial thing. In other words, we don't really have this issue of the XY table, scrolling text in and out of a viewing window. it always wraps within the window. So even if I make it bigger, I'll just go back to
larger,
the text doesn't flow over the edge of the screen, it just wraps here down to suit the viewing window. And this view that we have here was what we call an auto cue view or a teleprompter view, just like the newsreaders have, where you can actually scroll down the whole content. I'll just close this box here.
out of dialogue,
You can scroll down the content just with the down arrow key.
From transition at work, Furman on Saturday with brothers to track.
And that can be enormously beneficial to people with low vision. It's quite disconcerting. Anybody that's tried to, with magic, read through a web page where it's jumping around, it's magnified web page, the whole screen jumping about, it's actually quite disconcerting, which is one of the reasons why the document reader in Zoom Text is such a great thing. It does the same thing as this. It gives you wrapped to a window, compared to the application reader, which is of course just a window on the larger window, if you like, which means that text is all over the place and you're jumping about. Okay, so those are some of the low vision settings there. The things to watch out for, as I said, with the recognition is things that will stuff it up will be things like pen marks, creases, folds, let's say stains, coffee stains, that sort of stuff. Also, another thing that can interfere with it is light sources coming in from another angle. And you will be familiar with that with what happens to the clear reader as well if we get light coming in from another angle. Or shadows being thrown from your head with a light behind your head. That can also have an impact on the recognition mistakes that it makes. So be aware of those conditions that when you're in an office or so on, or with a customer, whether there are those sorts of things happening. All right, so before I go on to adjusting the workflow, we might have a look at what we can do with this now that we've actually got the text here. We could simply add another page. So we could simply turn over, light on.
camera light enabled,
And then I'm just going to scan another page, and the shortcut key was F4. And if you can see in your bottom right corner, it's telling you that it's processing page 3 on the status bar there, and that you're on line 3 of a certain number of page 3 of 3. So we're now on the third page. This is our third scan page. And we can move up and down with our arrow keys.
KS or News Limited.
And I'm now back on page 2. And I can use my page up and page down keys.
Today's to go at the National Lunch Saturday. Good man, unbeatable.
page 1,
Or I can use my control page up or page down keys to go a whole page at a time.
page 2,
Brent O'Neill.
page 3,
112.
So those are very conventional Windows navigation keys just for moving between pages. You'd be aware that page down on its own usually means move a screenful or a portion of a page rather than moving a whole page down. So that's why we have to use the control page down. So now that we've got 3 pages, we could just keep on adding pages. We can also make corrections to this in the edit mode.
file, edit mode.
So if we notice a mistake,
That on.
we can just delete things,
Cap T space. Vert space.
or we can add things in or correct things or whatever. But bear in mind, this is not correcting the original, of course. It's just correcting the text that has been recognized as the OCR process. So even though you might correct a spelling mistake or something like that, If you then go to the exact view, let's just do that now actually.
Thump tuck in SEQAFL Division 1 Cap H. Cap C.
And I go to the split view.
View. Split view. Leaving menus. Split view.
Can you see that the original still says thumped, but my text I've corrected to chumped? So if we save this document, the original will still have exactly as we saw, thumped, but the text version of it would have been changed to chumped. Just be aware of that as somebody might spend a lot of time correcting something and then rescan it or bring it up again to the original image file and wonder why none of their corrections have been preserved. Okay, but what can we do with it now that we've got it here apart from reading it?
File. File. New.
We can save it.
Save.
And if we do that, it will save it as an Openbook file, which is a combination file which includes the image and also the recognized text. Or we could save it as...
Save as. Select a file to save to dialog. File name. Edit box document 1.
And it defaults to an Openbook type file, which has got the extension OBX. But we could say...
Files of type. Combo box openbook docstar.obx. Openbook docstar.obx.
We could choose it to save it as a Word file, an RTF file, which is a simplified Word file, HTML, or a WordPerfect file. Anybody remember WordPerfect?
I remember it. It doesn't exist anymore. Or does it?
I still have it on a computer.
Do you?
Serious? Oh, wow.
Isn't that what we're using here too?
Don't tell them. Don't tell them. Actually, on that subject, before I forget, WordPerfect is the format I would recommend if you are then going to launch the Duxbury from Openbook. It just seems to do a better job if you save it as a WordPerfect file and then launch Duxbury from here. Trevor, I don't know if you found that too.
I haven't used WordPerfect. It's an interesting comment. A lot of the people I work with, I try the launchables.
Yeah.
It depends on who you've got. Like if it's an aide or somebody who's just used to Word, I often just to show them how to launch Word and it just copies the stuff in.
Yes.
But that's interesting. I haven't tried that.
Yeah, I was with some. I was up in Gladstone, Calliope, and at the school there they had an Everest embosser, Duxbury, Easy Converter, and Openbook, and a Perl. And I found that the best combination was to launch Duxbury but save as a WordPerfect file from the scan. It just preserved all the pages and numbering and headings and stuff like that better than if you'd done it as a Word file.
Word file.
Yeah, and that's because
Is WordPerfect still sold?
No, I don't think so. But the format, Duxbury, the Braille translator, was actually based very much on the WordPerfect styles. A lot of the coding is very similar, and I think that's the reason why the integration is better.
Is better.
Yeah.
So we used WordPerfect back in like 1991 or something as our word processor.
That's right.
Yeah, I was using
an
it all
old
through
DOS
the end of high
machine.
school. Yep, all through the end of high school, coming into TAFE and even starting uni, I was using WordPerfect.
Yeah.
That's right.
Anyway.
But it's essentially goes back to the coding, under the underlying coding, and there was a great thing in WordPerfect called reveal codes, and you could see the flow of codes and how that would affect the flow of text. Word moved over in the other direction, which was to the idea of styles, which is a superior idea, but the Duxbury coding, if you look at the reveal codes within the Duxbury, is very similar to the WordPerfect coding. Anyway, that's That's just an aside.
Openbook.star.obx.
So anyway, the point being that if somebody wanted a copy of this document in Word format, you could just save it as a Word document, and it would come across, including with embellishments like underline and bold and all those sorts of things. So it wouldn't just be the plain text. If you did want to save it as plain text, you have got the option here for a text file. And that might be useful for somebody that's using a Braille note taker, like a Braille note or something like that, where they might want to just see the plain ASCII text and without any extra codes. So that file could just be opened straight away on a Braille note display and just be read directly. Okay, so that's the first thing we can do. We can save it, and you'll notice that look at where it defaults to saving in this very obscure folder,
openbook.star.obx,
which I just created called New Folder. But the actual path to where Openbook tries to save it, and this is a bit of a trap for you, Nick, if you're trying to find where the hell did we save it to. I'll just show you the path to it. C drive.
Control not selected, recycle.
Program files.
File folder 5/12/2014 9
Freedom Scientific.
21 AM. Program files x86. File folder 8
Openbook.
18 2014
9.
4 7 PM. Not selected by iFind Reader 10. File folder 4 18 2013 4 2 PM.
So it's
Freedom Scientific.
a long
File
path.
folder 11 22 2012 7.
So that's just a little trap there, that if you're looking for something that's been saved, it can be buried quite deep into this filing structure here.
Right.
You can, of course, tell it to go somewhere different, to save somewhere else. And in the settings, I'll show you how to specify a certain place. An example would be where they're not allowed to save to the C drive, and that may be the case on your computer that you'll be doing, Nick. They may want to save to a shared directory on a network, or possibly to some other storage like a USB or something like that. And in the settings, you can actually tell it where to save stuff. Okay.
Out of dialog. File.
So we've seen that we can save it in a different format. We can also
Not a ticker.
save directly to an attached note taker, like a Braille note that's attached by USB, or indeed open from a text file from that note taker. If we have a
Braille. Submenu.
If we want to actually create Braille from this, we can do that too. But you have to bear in mind that the Braille translation table that it uses is just the grade 2 that's used in America, and it's not the UEBC standard that we use in Australia. So it would produce perfectly legible Braille, but it wouldn't conform exactly, precisely, pedantically to the format used here.
Apparently America is moving over to UEB.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's what they say.
And they have been for some time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, the thing is that on a personal basis, or even in the workplace where you're generating your own Braille, it really doesn't matter. But if you're in an educational institution, as I was when I was up at Gladstone, this just wouldn't cut it. You could not produce Braille for students that wasn't UEB. It just wouldn't be allowed. So in that, what I'm saying is that Openbook could not be used with its own Braille translator to produce Braille. It just would not be, in an educational setting, be allowed. Instead, what they would do is they would then channel the content here into Duxbury, which is the industry standard Braille translator, and use that to generate the Braille that we use here in Australia. Okay. Below that, we have another very interesting option.
Save to audio.
Save to audio.
Save to audio dialog. Please select a page range from the current document. Save page range. Radio button checked.
So let's just save the current page.
Save current page. Radio. Save to audio dialog. File name, edit box, MP3.
And we'll call it something.
S.
And we'll save it somewhere sensible.
Login, combo box audio, audio, desktop. Converting text to audio, dialog. Converting text to audio files. Please wait. Cancel, button. Converting page to audio file. Use 3 MP3.
Shut her up.
40 complete. 68 complete. 84 complete. Out of dialogue.
Okay, so we've just saved that.
When you said you hit the control...
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to ask you a question. When you tell her to shut up, if you just hit the control key, they'll just tell her to shut up, but it'll keep processing and doing what it needs to do. It's not a...
That's correct, Jeff.
Pause.
Correct. It's not. It doesn't interfere with, and the same with JAWS. It doesn't interfere with any processes that are happening. It just simply shuts the speech up. However, as soon as something changes, of course, Openbook, JAWS, and all of those speech programs will detect the change and start to read it. So in a file transfer or something like that, because the percentages are increasing, Openbook will say, oh, now we're up to 46%. I'll save something. So you can't completely mute it for that process. You can only just temporarily mute it till something else happens.
Jeff, Zoom Text and Magic work exactly the same way. The control keys are temporary shut up.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, so what's happened is it has created an MP3 file using the speech that I've set in my settings, which I think is Daniel here. I think Daniel's the name of the voice. So we'll just have a little look and see what that looks like. Here it is. It's on my desktop, News at 3 MP3. So I could download that to an iPod, an iPhone, and then listen to the content on the bus or wherever without having to fire my computer up. And that's a very powerful tool. So I'll just show you what on the computer. I think I just default to Windows Media Player when I double click on it.
1 to 12. On 113-15, 16-19, 20-30, February 1968, Woolston Grange Chumptuck in SEQAFL Division 1.
And you heard it say chumped, because this voice is of course reading the OCR'd text that I corrected when I was in edit mode. Just another thing to be aware of there. Okay, so you see how that could be useful? Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Openbook 9.0.
So the strength of Openbook is that not only can you just get a good quality recognized text, but you can do stuff with it. Trevor did mention about the concept of launching other programs, and in the launch menu, you can set up programs that can be launched, taking the text that has been scanned and then opening that program and pouring the text in. So here I have already set up some standard launchables. But what that means is when you first start and install Openbook, there are no launchable programs in this list. But if I run this process called
standard launchables,
if I run this process, it takes a little while. It'll take about 20 minutes to do. It will search through your system for any exe files that can handle text and ask you whether you want to add them to the list. And this is what I've done with my computer. And we have Duxbury for Windows, Word, WordPad, OneNote, and so on. So if let's say I hit Word now.
Word, please note dialog. File C, Program Files x86 Freedom Scientific Openbook 9.0 uses default library untitled. WPD already exists. Do you want to overwrite it? Yes, button.
And my launchable has been set to use this directory, and we haven't given this file a name yet. So I'm going to say yes, I'll overwrite it.
Dialog.
And now we have that text poured into Microsoft Word. Of course, I'm not running a screen reader at the moment. So as I arrow through things, it's not speaking. It's highly likely, of course, that your customers will have a screen reader running. And of course, they would then be hearing their screen reader speaking, probably with a different voice. What a lot of my customers do is they will actually have JAWS, for example, go to sleep when Openbook runs. It's still there running in the background, but the voice gets muted and the Openbook takes over with their voice. Or the other way around, the Openbook voice is muted and JAWS provides the voice. One good idea here is to configure your voices so that you know that you're in Word rather than Openbook. So sorry, Jeff, I see a note that my voice is breaking up. I'll just basically saying that it's sometimes a good idea if somebody is using JAWS or some other screen reader to configure their JAWS voice to be slightly different from their Openbook voice, so that you know when you're in Openbook and when you're in a Word document. So that's what happened when I used to manage launchables to simply invoke Word, taking the text from the scanned document. The same thing would have happened if I had been
Openbook 9.0 launch
to Duxbury.
Duxbury Windows.
And Duxbury's noticed that I saved it in a WordPerfect format, and just saying, are you sure that's okay? Yes. And now we have the text poured into the Duxbury Braille Translator program. Oh, and just while you're here, because a lot of you won't have used Duxbury, just to show you what it will do. It translates to Braille. And the dots you can see on the screen now are actually the dots that would be embossed on an embosser like the Mountbatten or the Indexed Everest or whatever. And that would be in correct Australian format. Okay.
Openbook 9.0.
So with if you need to do that, then it's just a matter of running the setup standard launchables and then finding the program that you want to launch from within Openbook. You may need to
manage launchables.
Edit what happens with these launchables.
Launch programs dialog. List control Duxbury Windows. C. Program files x86 Duxbury DBT 11.1 DBT WX.
So for example, with my Duxbury, I might want to edit
Add launch
that.
application dialog. Menu name. Edit box Duxbury Windows. Update button.
And for instance here, I've told it that I wish to save my Openbook content as a WordPerfect 7, and I wish to save it in this directory here. And this is, Nick, if you have to use launchables in this regard, you can specify the location here that you want it to go to.
Okay.
And you can browse for that folder there as well. Okay. In fact, if you know the name of the program, you don't need to go through the whole set up launchables. You could actually browse for it. But sometimes programs are very obscurely named. Duxbury is called dbtw.exe. Word is called WinWord. So, you know, it's not obvious where the program is.
Cancel button. List control Duxbury Windows. Out of dialog.
Okay, everybody okay so far?
Yep, going well,
Yep.
taking lots of notes.
Okay. So what we're going to do is now we're going to look at the...
Tools.
No, I'm going to mention some of the tools here. Obviously you've got a spell
Tools.
checker,
Spell check.
word count. Just things you'd expect in a word processor. They've got them built into Openbook as well. You have got an option to put a highlighter
Highlighter
in.
color. Submenu.
I'll mention that because I have actually got one customer that does use this. It's just like using a, you know, like one of those just pen highlighters to put yellow or green highlighter onto certain parts of the text. It's usually just used for people with vision who want to be able to mark up some of the documents.
Highlighter color. Submit. Start highlight. Leaving menus.
Cap T. Cap I.
And you'll notice that it's putting
Cancel highlight.
the highlight through both the image and the recognised text as well. This, of course, this will have no bearing on the text itself. It won't appear in a Word document or anything like that. But it is actually possible to search for highlight. One of my customers uses this. He searches for highlight, green highlights or yellow or blue highlights to quickly find areas.
Tools.
Okay, but the one...
Launch.
Oh, just while I'm in the launch menu, notice that you've got the photocopy here. The reason they put this in here is because when people have like multifunction scanner printers, it's actually quite handy to have a simple interface for controlling the photocopy process rather than go through some sort of LCD display on your all-in-one. Here they can just use the put the original into the scanner, and then they can just hit the photocopy option here in the menu and say how many copies they want and all that sort of stuff. So once again, in a sort of simple situation at home, this can be quite a useful way of using Openbook to manage sort of copy type activities. By the way, if you're wondering what book search is,
Submenu.
if you're connected to the internet,
Quick search. Quick book search dialog. Title. Edit box.
you can search some websites for books that have that are being transcribed to text. There's a couple of sites that they have pre-recorded. One is bookshare.org, the other one is Project Gutenberg. So if you're looking for Oliver Twist or something like that, you could just type in that into the search box here. It would go to the internet, to those websites, find the book and pour it into Openbook. You know, all 300 pages of War and Peace or something like that.
E. Book search results dialog. Searching for online books. Cancel search button.
I'm just doing this because I'm curious, that's all.
Search completed. Total 8 books found. Checklist box. War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy at Bookshare.org. Not checked.
And it's found 8 or so of them. And if I was to click on one of them, I could download it. I don't think I'm going to do that now. Bear in mind, these are just text files, so they will be a lot quicker to download than you know, an audio book or something like that. This is not an audio book. This is just a text file, which then Openbook would use its voice to read. Okay.
Out of dialog.
1.
Yep, very good.
Yeah, again, for people at home, that could be quite, you know, it could be quite a useful way of getting content. The only thing you must bear in mind is that, of course, the Openbook voices, though like the Jaws voices and the Magic voices, it's very good. But for reading novels like War and Peace and so on, it can be a bit like having Sandra Sully read War and Peace. You know, it's really just doesn't have the range of emotion that you need. So, yeah, all these
you do get used to it, especially if it's really often. You do, yeah. I actually read quite a lot of books that way, partially because I crank the speed up so high and I can actually get through them reasonably quickly.
Would you prefer to read a book with your Braille display? I mean, a fictional book, a novel?
It depends on the situation. In a lot of cases, yeah, especially if I'm somewhere where it's really noisy. But if I am in a situation where I just feel lazy and just want to sit back and let the phone do all the work or let my computer do all the work, I'm quite happy to sit there and listen to the speed. Look, it's not the best. It's certainly not the best in the radio you'll ever get, but as I said, I'm sort of going back in times when I've really haven't had an alternative.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think I'm just used to it.
Yeah. I think that where we get from your point of view, as you say, it's something that, is definitely, it's all positive, but many people who have had sight and read all their life visually lose sight. They still want the technology to produce the kind of reading experience that they had when they had sight. And so
it'll happen eventually.
Yeah. So, as you say, yeah, they'll be improving on the expression. And some of the expression voices now. What's the one that actually has got breath in it? That pauses for breath. Those voices.
Oh, that's horrible. That's one of the Mac voices.
One of the Mac voices. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the ones on the Mac. It's horrible.
One day.
Because it's taking breaths at really strange times. I don't quite know how they program that one, but anyway.
Oh dear. So we haven't quite got the Billy Connolly voice yet, or the Homer Simpson type voice yet, but it's yeah. So yeah.
Advanced.
I'm going to move on now to this something here about the pronunciation and OCR correction. I'm just going to mention about OCR correction first. There are many common mistakes.
OCR corrections dialogue. Misidentified word.
There are many mistakes that commonly happen with OCR, and it has a dictionary of corrections, so that if it sees what's a classic one, Danny? Look, there are a whole heap of things where it mistakenly says. I'll try this one here.
You've thrown me now. I can't think of them off the top of my head. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Sometimes there's things like Queensland will come across as old, because the little dash on the bottom of the Q gets misidentified. That's not a particularly good example, but I'm just trying to give you an idea where the recognizer, the OCR, makes a mistake. And there are many typical examples where it will make a mistake, but it has this dictionary built in that can apply corrections automatically. And you can add some in, as if you find that it's constantly misidentifying, maybe the font in a particular document or printout constantly gets misrecognized, you can add that in to the dictionary and it will then correct it automatically in the background. It's a bit like autocorrect in Microsoft Word.
Out of dialogue.
Okay.
Advanced.
Also, the other place it'll make mistakes is if you have a picture on the page, because there may be certain parts of the picture that might look like a letter. So you are going to get some rubbish if that's the case as well.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah. One thing you commonly find with OCR, and this applies to clear readers and everything, is that barcodes, they'll go 1111111111 or something like that, and it's just misidentifying a graphic symbol as vertical lines that it normally would say was 1, or I. These are common things that happen, but we can't say we can't do an OCR correction here to all the conceivable barcodes. So we just have to live with that and explain to the customer that if you hear that, look, that's just one of those things. It's a barcode. But quite useful is this thing called
Advanced Pronunciation Dictionary. Pronunciation Dictionary Dialogue. Word. Edit box 22,9-141.
There are many acronyms. I'll give you an example. Up in Queensland, we have the University of Queensland UQ, and throughout all of their documents, Openbook pronounces it as UC. You know, welcome to the UC website, because it doesn't know to say UQ as UQ. Yes,
that's a good one.
But much more embarrassingly,
K. Pronunciation. Edit box. Test. Button. Word. Edit box. Openbook. Test.
There you go.
Button.
Openbook. The program itself mispronounces itself.
Oh, really?
So one thing you might want to do,
if you actually write it with a capital B, it'll pronounce it correctly.
yeah, or even
K.
Word Openbook will be pronounced as Openbook.
And because I like that, I'm going to add it.
Word, edit box.
And you'll see that there's a whole list of things that they put in because they found that Openbook will tend to mispronounce it. Now, this is also, and I'm just thinking about this, whether it is reading voice specific or not. Danny, is this reading voice?
It can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of it can be. Some voices will get it right, some won't get it right.
Yeah. For example, the way the British voice, if selected, would say some things would be with a British pronunciation rules, whereas an Australian voice would say it with Australian pronunciation rules. So the British voice would say Kapalaba, but the Aussie voice would say Kapalaba, because it has rules about pronouncing those sequence of syllables. But if you do come across a place name and it's not pronouncing it right, let's just try that.
A. Test. Button. Word. Edit box. Kapalaba.
Yeah.
Pronunciation. Edit box.
And we could change that to something more like, oh gosh, how are we going to do this? You have to kind of fudge it.
P.
Yeah.
So can I throw in a thing for you? If you've got like in Victoria, they'll say Castlemaine, whereas in New South Wales we say Castlemaine.
Okay.
So that's what you're talking about, where you can actually say, you could.
Yeah.
Test. Button.
So how does that pronounce it?
Pronunciation. Edit box. Test. Button. Pronunciation. Edit box. A. T. E.
Word Castlemaine will be pronounced as Castlemaine.
So you want it Castlemaine.
Pronunciation. T.
Well, that's
Like
the way
that with the English voice.
New South Welshmen will say it like
Word
that.
Castlemaine will be
Victorians say it
pronounced as Castlemaine.
All right.
Oh, there
so
you go.
there you go.
Yeah.
So you.
So
Yep. But remember that this is not affecting the text in the document. It's not adjusting the text in the document. It's just adjusting the pronunciation of the text. But it will be consistent through all text that's scanned in, which is very powerful, like in the example of the UQ, where it doesn't matter what document you've scanned, it will always pronounce it correctly. Or in fact, you could expand it. So if you wanted UQ to be University of Queensland, you could just put University of Queensland into the pronunciation box. Okay?
Out of dialogue.
Right. So now we'll get into the subject of workflows.
Acquire. Acquire. Workflow. Submenu.
Not quite sure where they got this term workflow from. We used to call them configuration files. The
View. Acquire. Acquire. Workflow. View. Acquire and read modify checked.
the acquire and read means basically these are presets. They can be modified. As you can see, I've already modified the acquire and read preset. I've made an adjustment to one of the settings. But what they did is they got some templates or presets and said, look, these are handy to just quickly hit a set of configurations that works better for this kind of situation. So acquire and read usually by default means take a picture and start reading it. Then if I press F4 again, it will append page 2 and start reading that, and so on and so on. It's the most popular setting. But the other presets are acquire the image only, where we want to quickly just scan the image but not do any processing. We just want to get the images in, and we might process them another time. Acquire in the background, this preset allows you to be scanning but doing something else whilst you're scanning page 2, page 3, page 4. So for example, you might be wanting to listen and pay attention to page 1, which might take, a couple of minutes to read, but page 2, page 3, page 4 will be being acquired in the background. Or you might be doing something completely different. You might be doing an email but be listening to this in the background. So you might be sort of getting the scanning going on in the background whilst you're working with an email or something like that. What happens is when it's ready for the next page, it will make a musical sound so that you know that it's ready to scan another page. The mail sorter preview option, this is a set which just scans the first couple of inches of the document and then starts reading that out as quickly as possible. It's actually got the resolution set down quite low, just to 200 dots per inch, and just to scan the top 2-inch margin. The idea was that if you want to just quickly identify what the document is without having to wait for the whole document to be processed, you can use that setting. The reason they call it mail sorter is where people's got a stack of envelopes. They just want to toss an envelope underneath it, scan the first inch, then they put it in a pile according to what that envelope is, whether it's important or whatever. So they call it mail sorter preview. And once again, you can modify those settings to say, oh, I want the top 4 inches or just the top 1 inch. Okay, then we have the concept of multi-page documents. A multi-page document is where you can start a scanning process where it's going to be prompting you to scan the next page, not being a manual process whereby you press F4 when you're ready to scan another page. The multi-page assumes that it's going to be scanning until you tell it differently. Now that can be a sort of semi-manual where it makes a sound and is ready for you to do the next page. Or it can be automatic, and mine is set for automatic at the moment, where it will actually, as soon as it detects that the image is still, just like on the Sarah CE, it will then take the shot. And then when the next page is turned and still, there's no movement, it will take the next shot. In fact, that's exactly what is in the Sarah CE. It is Openbook set to one of these modes. Multi-page prompt for pages is you have to actually press the the next button to continue to take the next page. Poetry and recipe. This preset tries to preserve the page structure. Normally, when Openbook is processing a page, it tries to keep the text flowing as much as possible. And a classic example of that is if there are columns on the page, it will append the middle column to the left column and keep it in just one long flowing column. But in poetry and recipe mode, it tries to preserve the exact line structure exactly as it is, so that instead of flowing as much as it can, it will try and keep that line structure as exactly like the original as possible. And of course for poetry that's important, and for recipes that can be important too as well, when you just want to go down line by line. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right.
Yep, that's good.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we can adjust. Well, actually, before I do this, I was going to show you how to adjust some of these workflows. But notice at the moment on my acquire menu, I have the option to acquire and replace the current page, which means rub out the page you've currently got and superimpose the new page, or acquire and insert a new page. So let's say you accidentally, when you're scanning a book or something, you missed a page. You can go in and squeeze a page in and everything will renumber properly after that. So you just push it in. Re-recognize is basically just to have another go at recognizing the page that's under there. Check orientation is normally set in most of the modes to automatically work out whether it's upside down or left to right, just as it is with our clear reader and so on. But you can also get it to check whether it's in portrait or landscape mode and so on. And recognize columns is currently set, and it normally is set. Recognize columns is where it will try and work out the columns on a page and put them in the correct order, in a flowing structure, left, middle, right. If you don't have that checked, it will read across the row. And that's what you would use, of course, for, you'd want that for a bank statement. You want it to read across the row. Or if you've got anything in tabular format, spreadsheets, that sort of stuff, you don't want recognized columns on. You need to turn it off. Otherwise, it'll just try and read the left side, then the middle, then all the other columns, which won't make any sense in a table structure. These issues are the same we have for the clear reader and so on, where we tell it to go into table mode or to column mode. Split facing pages. If your book is smaller than A4, let's say you had a book and you opened it up and it was small enough to fit within the Pearl viewing area, you can tell it to honour the fact that the left page is a different page from the right page. In other words, it's not just two columns that are just all on one page, but in fact there are two separate pages, and you want to recognise that so that in the OCR document it will say page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6. Just be careful though that that's Openbook's understanding of pages is the number of scanned pages. It may have nothing to do with the original page numbering of say a textbook. So it's actually quite difficult to synchronize those things. Just be aware that if it says page 6 in Openbook, that may not be page 6 on the original document. Just depends how the scanning worked. Alright, so I'm going to go and look at some of the workflow settings, and we don't adjust it through here, we adjust it through the settings menu.
Settings.
Sorry guys, I've got to go and shut down and catch my bus. I'll talk to you all later.
See you, Danny. Okay.
Bye, Danny.
Bye.
In the settings menu, you can go directly to a particular setting, for example, visual settings, keyboard settings, and so on. But they are actually all combined into one multi-tab. So,
Unavailable. General settings.
so if I go to workflow
Workflow
settings,
settings. Leaving menus. Openbook settings. Workflow settings page. Workflow name. List box. Acquire and read modified current.
you'll see that it is a multi-tabbed dialog box, and we're looking at the workflow settings, but all of the other settings are available at the click of a tab: general settings, speech settings, and so on. So looking at my workflow, the first thing I'm going to just point out is that the recognition default, that is the strategy that the OCR uses to work out the letters on the page, is set to balanced. The other options are
Recognition default strategy. Combo box balanced. Balanced.
fastest and most accurate. What happens here is if you change from balanced, it will use either reconfigure the OCR engine that's running in the background or use a different one to get a different result. The fastest will get you straight to the text quicker than balanced or most accurate, but there may possibly be more mistakes because it's a bit rough and ready. For example, the dot resolution, the amount of dots it looks at may be a bit coarser, but it'll therefore be quicker. The most accurate will spend a lot more time making sure it's correct, using a higher dot resolution and so on, but it'd just be a bit slower. Now, this is not actually set in concrete. I've found sometimes where I've OCR'd using most accurate and it actually is least accurate. It's almost like it's overthinking it. Sometimes it actually generates more mistakes because it's overthinking than if you just used a balanced or even the fastest. So just be aware of that, just because you think, oh, well, let's just crank it all up to most accurate, you actually may be creating more trouble than leaving it on balanced. And I would recommend that for most things you leave it on balanced. The OmniPage for JAWS is one of the engines that JAWS uses to do OCR on-screen images. So that they put that in here now as well. But we'd almost exclusively be working with the paperwork ones like balanced.
Balanced.
And then the languages, what we mean by this is not the speech output languages. We're basically saying what is the primary language that the document you're scanning is written in. In this case in English, and well I have United States here, but we could have chosen
Recognition defaults language 1. Combo box English United States. English United States.
We could have done English United Kingdom. So from our point of view in colonial Australia, we might as well leave it on United States because at least they use dollars, and so we'll get a bit more recognition accuracy with dollars than we would with the pound sign. So I generally leave it on English United States.
English United States. English United States.
And because in the United States they often have people who speak another language, like usually Spanish, they might have a secondary language as Spanish. The idea is that if the document has two languages printed in it, in the same document, it would employ both strategies depending on, it will detect Spanish and it will just switch its rules to Spanish for Spanish characters and so on. Okay, what we're going to do is I'm going to select, say, the acquire and read workflow, and I'm going to modify it. I could create a new workflow with a new name based on the template acquire and read. So it's very similar to the idea of templates in Word. I'm just going to go modify now.
Workflow modify button. Workflow. Acquire page. Acquisition mode. Combo box single.
Okay, and you'll see here that there are various controls to adjust how the scanning and recognition process will work, and they split it into two parts. The scanning is called the acquire and the OCR is called the process here. We'll look at the scanning side first.
Single.
Whether you're going to be just doing a single page at a time or multiple pages. In this case we're just going to do single page at a time. In other words, we're not using an automatic document feeder or something like that. And the color mode is set to color, but we could choose
Image properties color mode combo box color.
grayscale. And that
Color.
normally you'd leave it on color. Grayscale would be a little faster because there's less colors, if you like, to process. But normally we just leave it on color. With modern computers, the processing of these documents is so fast anyway that you may as well leave it cranked up as much as you can. In olden days, this could slow the process down quite a lot if we'd chosen higher colors and higher resolutions and so on. The resolution is by default set to 300 dots per inch, and that's a very good place to leave it. Cranking it up
Image properties resolution combo box 300.
may work a little
300.
better for very small footnotes, the sort of footnotes you get in textbooks or in legal situations. You may need to crank it up to 400. You'd never need to crank it up to 600. And if you do crank it up, you may find that you introduce more mistakes because it's overthinking it. So sometimes you may get a better result by lowering the resolution.
300.
But generally we would leave it on 300 dots per inch. You can, of course, adjust how much of the scan is processed. At the moment we have it set to full device length. That's full. Actually, that's full SCAP rather, or A4. It may be that you might want to reduce it to just half the page, just to speed up that scanning process. This is not really relevant at all with the Pearl because the Pearl takes the whole image in one go. But if they've got a flatbed scanner attached, one of the slowest parts of the scanning process is that whirring away as it runs the arm up and down the length of the document. And you can restrict that to the top 10%, 20%, 30% if that's the only bit that's of importance. And you can adjust the contrast. Now I've left, well, and I would generally recommend you leave it on automatic. But this is an example where a blind person could adjust the contrast if they felt that there was the issue with the recognition quality was the fact that the contrast was not good. And there's an example where an out-of-the-box OCR program or one that goes straight into Word would not give the blind person that degree of control, that level of tweakability. A blind person here can just use their tab key.
Acquisition size. Adjust image automatic contrast. Checkbox.
Press the space bar.
Adjust image automatic contrast.
Jump into the slider.
Slider controller.
And just use the arrow keys to adjust the contrast here.
8.
There's an example where a blind person can take control of the fine detail of the scanning process. Examples would be very poorly reproduced photocopies. You know how sometimes photocopies can come out too light or too dark. Well, this gives them the opportunity to make an adjustment. What you would do here, if this was part of their work, that they've frequently got documents that were too faint or too dark, they might set up their own workflow and call it a name like, roster 2 or something like that, where they always get a particular sort of document. They can create their own workflow, call it something meaningful, make the tweaks, and just invoke it for that kind of document. Does that make sense, Nick?
Adjust image automatic contrast. Checkbox. Checked.
Yeah, Nick, are you still here?
Yes, that does. Yes, that's good.
Yeah. And so then the other parts.
Yes, can you hear me okay? Yep.
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Yeah. The other parts of this are, whether a progress is notified. The shutter sound, for example, is the scan initiated sound. The acquisition tones as it's going through that acquisition process, and some sort of musical thing to let you know that it's got the image and so on. You can turn these off if they're not relevant. And you can see that the page placement is in the acquire and read mode is defaults to append to the document.
Page placement. Combo box append to document.
But you could tell it that the acquire and read would just always replace the current page. And there are cases, one of my clients, that's exactly what he does. He's not allowed to and does not wish to record the long sequence of scans. He works in a call center and he gets job sheets. He scans them, phones the customer, reads the details and so on. But he doesn't want to keep the details. In fact, he's not allowed to because he's got credit card information. So his default is just to overwrite the page, and so he replaces current page as his workflow.
Append to document.
And because we're in a single mode, none of the multi-page acquisition things are available. But if I had been in
acquisition mode,
multiple mode,
single, multi-bell,
then the multi-page acquisition is now available, and we can tell it whether to prompt or to automatically acquire pages. And we can even set a page delay where it will actually give a few seconds or a second or so between pages. With the Pearl, of course, what it does is it waits for the image to be stable before it takes the next shot. You can, in addition to that, stick some extra time on top if you wish, of a second or so, but mostly you would leave it at 0 and let the fact that it's to do with the Pearl settling down rather than adding any extra time. Otherwise it's a bit of a pain because you have to wait a second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds extra every page. And duplex mode is where, for example, you might have an automatic document feeder and you might scan all the odd pages first, and then turn the stack over and scan all the even pages. And it will then be able to correctly interpolate the pages in the correct order, so that what you do is it go 2, 4, 6, and then it would go 7, 5, 3, 1 as you turn the stack over. That can be a little bit complicated, and you've got to know what you're doing with turning over the pages and so on. But that can be quite useful if people have got loose sheets that they want to go in duplex mode. Okay, so moving on to the processing tab.
Process page.
This is the OCR side, and it's using the default recognition, which was balanced. But we can go in here and tell it that for our workflow, acquire and read, we want to use a different sort of level of a different strategy. We might want the, for example, might want the most accurate. So if this would mostly apply where we want to create our own customized workflow. For example, the one I talked about where you regularly got poorly printed pages, and you've worked out a way of adjusting it, tweaking it just right, and you find, oh, I need to use the most accurate, I need to use 400 dots per inch, I need to use a darker contrast, and you then make these tweaks here, and you give it a name that's for that particular kind of document. But here at the moment, we'll use the default recognition, and we'll just look at some of the other options here. Just going from left to right, the image processing. When we save the document, do we keep the exact view? Actually, not even at the saving point, even at the display on the screen point. If we don't have the exact view checked, you won't be able to refer, as we are here, to a split view, because the exact image view will have been discarded. Jeff, thanks for that. Okay, I hope that was useful.
Very, thank you very much. Sorry I can't stay on any longer.
Okay, see you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye. If you uncheck the keep exact view, the process will be faster. You won't take up any room and so on, but you won't be able to refer back to the original. The announce orientation, this will normally unchecked, but if it was checked, then for every page that you scan, it would say portrait right side up or landscape upside down, so that the blind person could know that the page was this way or that way around. Despeckle is a set of rules that looks at the image file and tries to get rid of any unnecessary spots and splotches and so on. It does this with an algorithm that looks at things that could just be dots and like little flecks and dots, and just removes them, and so that they don't interfere with the recognition process. So for example, you don't want to have lots of dots being interpreted as full stops. So despeckle is normally on. It's usually a useful feature. Moving through to the middle, we have page layout. And this is also available, as you know, more immediately in the menus for recognize columns, ignore columns. But you can say the default for a particular workflow is recognize columns or not. And for a table, what it's saying here is, do you wish to give the emphasis to the rows of the table or to the columns of the table? Do you wish the flow to be laid out in row format or in a column format? Text processing. You'll see here that it says apply OCR corrections. This is what we were doing before with the dictionary for OCR corrections. So you would normally have that checked. It will just add a few milliseconds to the processing, but you'll get a better result. Text emphasis will be things like bold and that sort of thing. Do you want to keep it? Yes, you normally do. And a bit of a fossil from the old OCR days, replace uncertain text. Where it was uncertain of whether something was a certain character, and you wish to indicate that the OCR was uncertain, you could tell it
text
that
processing replace uncertain text.
You could put something
text
in
processing uncertain text mark tilde,
like a tilde or some uncommon sign,
tilde, caret,
or something like that to indicate that the Openbook wasn't sure about the character, and so rather than having a stab at it, it would replace it with a character, so that you know, an unusual character, so you know that there was some uncertainty about the text that had been recognised. generally I would leave that as
Text
not
processing
doing it.
replace uncertain text. Checkbox.
And
Not checked.
people will usually work out from the context of the word what it should have been. Preserve line breaks means that if you want for example, between paragraphs, there might be, say, 6 or 7 line breaks in the original. And if you want to preserve that, because it might mean something, you'd have that checked. But normally you'd want it to take out any unnecessary line breaks. Okay, everybody's leaving. I understand that. It's 5 o'clock. So what I might do, Nick, is there anything you want to concentrate on here, or any issues that you want to go back over?
Out of dialogue. Workflow.
That was good on the workflow and those settings there. That was really good, actually. I didn't really... what about editing documents, Peter?
Yep. Okay. All right.
Out of dialogue.
1.
So your best thing to hear, the way to look at this is, why are you editing the document? Is it how much do you need to preserve the document, and what you might be doing with the document? So if it's just a quick thing, that you want to make corrections there on screen whilst you're there, yeah, just go into edit mode and just use your usual delete key.
4.
Just type as usual.
Space.
As if you're in a word processor. Bearing in mind always that you are now making a disconnect between the original image here and the recognized text. The two things are not the same anymore because you've introduced text that wasn't in the original. And that can lead to some unforeseen consequences.
Okay, so this could be...
Yeah?
This could be an annotation for their own information,
Yes.
or for their own notes, perhaps.
Yes, it could be. Just be mindful of that. So let's take an example where I save this document.
File. Save. Leaving menus.
And then a week or two's gone past and I open the document again.
View. File. Leaving menu. File.
Or whatever. Let's say I've opened it again, but I've opened it in exact view.
Leaving menus.
Yeah?
22.9 hello.
Yeah.
And then I get it to read from that point, and I hear, not what I see on the screen, I hear this.
22.9 hello 41 starting blue highlight to 11.2.
I hear all that. That's stuff that's in the underlying text, but not in the original. And so that can be confusing for a low vision person who'd forgotten that they'd typed stuff in. It's primarily an issue in education where the teachers haven't really appreciated that they've done something which is now not synchronized with the original text, the original image, I mean. So it's just to be aware that if I'm in the text view, of course, you can see what you've done.
File. View. Text view.
Space. EH.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. But if people are going to be doing more serious work with it, they would probably really just launch it into Word, or save it as a Word file and then open Word separately and open that file as a Word file and do the correction with JAWS and just all of the power of Word. Because this is a very limited word processor.
Okay. Can I just ask?
Yes. Yep.
Sorry, Peter.
Yeah.
I just remember in Win they said, like if you're correcting a word, they said don't delete the word and then type in your correction because it loses the link between the exact view word and the word on the, in this mode. So what they'd say is correct all the letters you want, but don't have a situation where you remove the word completely.
Yeah. That's right.
That makes sense. Otherwise, it won't be highlighted as it's read.
That's also correct. Yes. Of course, we're talking about in the exact view, it wouldn't be highlighted as it's read. Let's just do that now.
View.
Actually, let's just make it a bit more obvious.
4 F space, black 2.
View. Exact view. Leaving.
22.9 hello.
Actually, yes, I know what you're saying. We also need to correct the...
Yeah.
View.
So let's take
View.
something out that's
Leaving
here.
menu.
Let's take
Cap
out
G.
the word Grange.
Space, cap C. 9.
View. Exact view. Leaving menus. Exact.
22.9 hello. 22.9 hello, my name is Peter41 starting blue highlight to 11.268 Woolston ending blue highlight chump duck in SE.
Yeah, you're right. So because I've taken the Grange out in the underlying text, it's just skipped over in the exact view as well. So
Yeah.
look, I think it's just...
So it can get confusing a bit if you, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think this is more in an educational setting. Generally speaking, in the workplace setting, most people will be using this from a blindness point of view, or mostly at a very large print view in a text view. So they would. It's the exception rather than the rule that they would need to refer to the. As long as you're aware that, just aware that there is a connection between the exact view and the recognized text view, but that you can, if you like, disrupt that connection by deleting words, and of course you can change the way things are pronounced or add things in, but you'll start to disrupt that connection. One mistake that people often make is they don't like the pronunciation of the way it's pronounced, and they'll make the corrections to the document to make it sound better. They should be doing that in the pronunciation dictionary.
Advanced. Pronunciation dictionary.
Rather than in the recognised text. The advantage of doing it in the pronunciation dictionary, of course, is that that applies to every occurrence of the word that might appear, as I was saying with the example of U, Q, and so on.
Settings, leaving menus.
Okay, just going back to settings again.
Settings, general settings, leaving menus. Openbook settings, general settings page. Start up document, open untitled document, radio button, checked.
There's in the general settings, the way Openbook behaves, does it open a new document, like a blank new document called untitled, or does it remember the last document you worked with? Do you start in edit mode, or do you, as is default, start in read-only mode? This buck scan currency thing doesn't apply here in Australia.
Buck scan currency. Combo box US dollar.
It only understands North American dollars. Now what that is a facility whereby you can put currency under the scanner and it can scan it and tell you that it's a $100 note or a $1 note or whatever, but has no bearing here in Australia at all.
US dollars.
Then we have the location. This is where I was saying, Nick, earlier, that if you want to specify a location for
Default location for files.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the meaning of that. Yeah, default settings location. It's saying that you can specify. Yeah. I've specified a new folder here, but you can specify somewhere else. And the default image file is JPEG, but you can specify a whole heap of other different images.
JPG.
And don't get me started. This I don't know which one to recommend. I'll just stick with JPEG.
JPG.
And we might just finish up on speech settings.
Speech settings page. Voice selection. Combo box.
This, Nick, is the voice selection. There are, I think, 3 or 4 voices that you can specify.
Reading voice.
3, sorry. the reading voice, which is the document voice, the menu voice, which is the voice that's used as you're going through menus, and the emphasis voice is for things that are in, for example, in bold or something like that, whether it will choose a different voice for that. So normally people would configure a different reading voice to the menu voice so that the blind person would know that they're in a menu, or they would know that they're in the document.
Reading voice. Reading voice.
All of the controls you see here will apply to the one that's selected here in this combo here. But you can apply everything to all the voices if you wish by selecting Apply Setting to All Voices. So the first thing is you choose a synthesizer. The ones you're hearing now are the RealSpeak solo voices, and they come with Openbook, but they do need to be installed. So on the CDs that Openbook comes with, there's a separate, on the program disc, you do need to install the RealSpeak solo voices as a separate process to have access to them. Otherwise you just get the bulk standard American voices. Once you've installed these RealSpeak voices, you'll get a choice of names here.
Reading voice settings name. Combo box Daniel. Daniel.
That's a British voice, but you can choose
Lee. Lee.
And if you want to test the voice, it'll just read some text here.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him.
And you can change the rate that he speaks at. And the rate that you select here will be the rate that it records into the save as audio. So if you specify a faster or a slower rate, that will also be the rate at which it reads if you save the audio file.
Okay.
Punctuation is normally left to sum.
Reading voice settings punctuation. Combo box sum.
If you set it all the way up to all, he will save friends, comma, Romans, comma. That would be like almost like a proofreading mode where you want to hear every single apostrophe. Definitely not much fun listening to a document like that. So that's why most punctuation is set to sum, where it preserves the flow, but it doesn't say comma, apostrophe, or anything like that. In fact, people, if they want to get to that proofreading level, they would usually go into edit mode and use their arrow keys to go letter by letter through the document for that level of accuracy, but still leave the punctuation set to sum to get that flow. Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes sense. That's good.
Sum.
Of course, you might be wondering, why would you not enable speech? Of course, a blind person would need the speech to hear not just the menus, but also the document. Well, the reason is some blind people use Braille displays and have the speech turned off because they're actually reading the Braille display. Also, some people would use another screen reader like JAWS. They prefer to have JAWS to read everything. And they would disable the speech in Openbook and let JAWS do all the reading, the voices and everything. Remember that if you make changes here, you'll need to save the settings in the Save Settings menu.
Okay.
Capital letters while typing, does it announce cap C when it sees a capital C, or when you're typing, cap R, so that you know that you're in capital mode and that you put in a capital? Do we announce the dialogue controls, like in this dialogue? This is called a dialogue control. This is a dialogue box. Do you want it to announce, like radio button checked, or drop down list box 1 of 6? That's the sort of thing that dialogue controls voiced would actually speak out loud. Do you wish to announce bookmarks as they are put into the document? You can put bookmarks in and read the bookmark as you put it in. I haven't actually covered bookmarks, but it is possible to put bookmarks into the flow of the text as you go. This is very important. The numbers are single digits. It has a big impact. it depends on the kind of document that you're commonly scanning. You'll know this from ClearReader as well. When it comes across a telephone number, does it say 3,463,003, or does it say 3,463,7,824? And that is something that it depends on what the most frequently sort of numbers are in your document. If the numbers are numbers you want to hear as 7,462,000 blah blah blah, then you would have this unchecked. But if it's very important to you that numbers are read out as single digits, especially phone numbers, then you'd have that checked.
Right.
If Openbook has detected that there is a recurring header or footer, it can read that header or footer or ignore it by checking or unchecking that headers and footers box. Your highlights. Now the highlights we're referring to here are like the blue highlight that I inserted into the text, and here it did actually say blue highlighter on, and it announced that because my setting was set to announce highlights. And again, if I'd had bold text, clearly bold text or underlined text, I could have had it say underline or bold, so that the user would know that we switched to a bold text or something like that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and with pausing as it's reading after each line, does it have an extra pause at the end of the line, or just flow naturally onto the next line? In most cases, you'd have it no extra pause, but in some cases, you might want it to give a pause as it to indicate that we had come to the end of a line, and give a pause of some amount.
Extra pause after each line. Combo box, no extra pause. No extra pause. No extra pause.
Key echo during editing is when you're typing, you'd hear every character that you typed spoken out, P-E-T-E-R. But some people like to type and wait for the word to be complete before it says the word Peter.
Key echo during editing. Combo box character.
So you could switch it to word so that as they're typing it would be silent until the word is complete before it says the word. And some people find that if they're a good typist, they probably switch it to word rather than character. If they're a poor typist, they want to know that every character they pressed is correct. And there's an option for both as well, where it would not only would it echo every character, but it would also echo the word when the word is complete. Or you could turn it off so that it didn't do anything as you type.
Character.
And the skim reading is a facility whereby you can actually skim read through the document, and at the moment it's set to just read the first sentence of every paragraph as you down arrow through the document.
Skim read speaks paragraph. Combo box first sentence. First sentence.
And I can't remember what the command is to skim read. It's a variation on the arrow key. Danny, if he was here, would tell me, oh, it's alt down arrow or something. But it's basically a way, if you've got a big document, not
I can't remember it.
that you can skim through it, just hear the first line or the first sentence of each paragraph.
First sentence.
So always, always, always when you make changes, remember
Speech settings.
Out of
to
dialogue.
go to the settings.
Settings. Save settings dialogue.
Save
Use
the
settings
settings.
file name. Edit box. Please note dialogue. Out of dialogue.
Right. Okay.
Look, there is a lot to Openbook, and it can be used in a sophisticated way or a very simple way. I think you need to look at the sort of documents your user is working with on a regular basis, and try and keep it as straightforward as possible, minimize the keystrokes, but be aware that some documents might require quite a sophisticated strategy to get a really good result. I think the purpose of this overview is mainly to see like the R's and all the stuff you've got available. As you rightly said, Nick, the help is pretty good.
Help. The keyboard commands. Submit. About Openbook.
So, you know, you've got quite a lot of training available in the help system.
Help. Leaving menus. Openbook help. Contents page. Help.
It's quite detailed, isn't it?
It is, yeah. But also, as you've discovered, it's really quite difficult to wade through all of this from go to woe. I think it helps to have somebody just take you through it and say, look, this is useful, this isn't. And what does this particular phrase mean? But yeah, this facility here is quite...
What's new in Open?
For some people, it's actually worth spending some time introducing them to how to use the help in Openbook so they can kind of teach themselves. So the thing you have to understand here, Nick, is that if we assume that a person is not a mouse user, they need to be able to use arrow keys in the navigation view at the top, which is called a tree view. So I'm just going to use arrow keys here.
Open what's new in topic what's new. Close license agreement.
And it said closed license agreement. To open it, I press the right arrow key.
License agreement opened.
To close it, I press the left arrow key.
License agreement closed. Closed setting up and using your Pearl camera. Setting up and using your Pearl topic setting up.
But you'll notice that the content is not being automatically displayed in the content pane. I need to press enter.
Setting up and using your Pearl camera. Introducing.
To get that content in the content window. And to get back to the navigation pane without using a mouse, I need to press the F6 key.
Contents. Topic setting up and using your Pearl camera.
The F6 key is commonly used in assistive technology to jump between panes. These are called panes. There's only 2 panes in this system. F6 jumps between them.
Pearl, congratulations.
Contents. Topic setting up.
Do you get that? So,
yep, I got that. That's good.
If you can at least introduce your client to navigating between those panes, it means that they can very much teach themselves the finer points of Openbook. To get to the, you'll notice that this is a multi-tab dialog. It's got contents and index. Without a mouse to get to the index, you use the control tab.
Index page. Help you. Help you.
That's control tab.
Oh, okay.
Contents page. Help you. Help you.
And to come out of help,
out of dialog,
just press escape. By the way, that control tab is also used in any Windows type dialog.
Setting. General settings. Leaving menus.
So I'm currently on general settings. If I want to use just the keyboard, to get to speech settings, I do control tab.
Speech settings page.
Workflow settings page. Visual settings page. Preferred view.
You get that?
Combo box text view.
Yeah, got that. That's good.
Because you'll get that. You'll get a blind person saying, well, I don't know how to use a mouse. Show me how to use it with the keyboard. And you need to know those methods.
Yep.
20.
Okay, so that's pretty much it for Openbook and Pearl. If you don't have any...
That's great, Peter. That's really... Yeah, one more question is, I haven't got a camera with me, but to have a look at some documents and just practice using the various menus and settings, where might I find one in my version of Openbook?
Yeah, there are some examples. So
Openbook 9.0.
if you go to the File menu,
File,
and you go to
Open, select a file to file name, edit box.
And you, if you're not already looking at the correct directory, and I'm not because I set my folder to be a different place, what you need to do is follow this path.
Look in, combo box new folder.
Right.
Folder, local disk C. List control program files x86. File folder 8/18 2014 5:27 p.m. Not selected by art.
Freedom Scientific. So it's Program 86, Freedom Scientific.
Openbook. File folder 3
9.
9.0. File folder 8/18 2014 5:6 p.m.
Users.
Shared. File.
Yep.
Library.
File folder 3/22 2012 9:28 a.m. Not.
Examples. So I'm just going to let's show you that. I'll show you that again.
Looking. Combo box examples. Examples.
It's a bloody long path.
Yeah. This is a long one. I think I've got them all there.
I'll leave it on the screen
Shared,
for a moment.
missed out shared. Users shared.
But it will default to it. If you just install it, that'll be its default library.
Yeah, library
Okay.
default. Yeah. And in the
Right, I've got them all except shared, so that's good.
yeah, there's some good ones here. So, for example, you know, if you go to say mutiny.
List control mutiny OBX 3430. Document mutiny OBX. View. Exact view. Leaving menus. Exact view.
So here you go. This is from the text, the mutiny on the Bounty. And just you can play with these various views and so on.
Split view. Leaving menus. Split view.
I must have mucked around with it because this one's highlighted. Sometimes I do this. I stuff around with it and I save it, forgetting that it's my original example.
Yeah, you got to remember not to save.
Yeah.
I've done that myself.